Hey guys, today's video is going to be looking at slide guitar, but instead of kind of actually looking at, like licks and stuff, I wanted to first do a video on what I think is the most kind of important technique of fingerstyle slide guitar, and that's the muting with the right hand. A lot of people overlook this a bit, but I think it's when you get this down that you really start sounding good and getting to grips with fingerstyle slide guitar. I've seen both Warren Haynes and Derek Trucks in interviews cite this as the quintessential technique of their playing, and what kind of really helped to take them to the next level. Just to clarify before we go any further, I'm not saying you can't play slide guitar with a pick. A lot of slide players like Rykuda say like playing with a pick is absolute heresy, but there's a lot of great slide players who do use picks out there. John Squire, for instance, probably the most underrated guitarist of the 80s, just saying. Personally, I swear by fingers. I think it's got a lot more options for muting, but I'm not looking to like kick up a debate. You do what you want. You don't want to do it this way, don't do it this way. Pick and fingerstyle both have their perks and pitfalls, and this is the slide technique, like fingerstyle's the technique I prefer at this moment in time, so that's the one I'm doing a video on. The key principle here is that when you're playing with a slide and you only want 2 or 3 strings ringing, or you're trying to play like a single note line, a lick, the slide's going to be resting on other strings too, not just the ones that you want to be hearing. This kind of results in a bit of background noise, sometimes residual, but sometimes, especially if you're playing through an amp, it can be really noticeable, and it's kind of, generally not what you want. It's not as noticeable in open tuning, but if you're playing standard tuning, this technique is pretty vital to getting a good, clean sound. Like, if you're just trying to play a single note line up, you're not muting properly, as you can probably hear there, all the other strings getting pressed down by the slide start ringing, start making noise that you don't want to be creeping in. But when you play better, using a better right hand muting, it sounds a lot cleaner. You can play single note lines really nice and really clean. It generally makes you sound a lot more sleek and less sloppy. Now what this technique relies on is resting each finger, or like fingers of your fretting hand, on most of the strings down here to mute them. Say I just want to play a single note on the A string, for instance. When I lift my first finger, which is muting it, to pluck it, I'll leave it off and let the A string ring. And the rest of the strings kind of, if there was a slide sliding about on here, slide, see. The rest of the strings stay muted because all my fingers here are just resting on the strings, keeping them quiet, keeping them shun. So you get no noise, no kind of interference from the other strings. Now say I want to move on to the D string, I'll pluck the D string and let my forefinger go back down so it mutes the A again. So now we have just the D ringing. So move on to the G, so this finger's going to go back down, ring finger's going to come up as it plucks the G. You just kind of want to get used to that, like only having one string ringing at once. Messed it up there. Like that's going to feel really unnatural at first. Once you kind of get a bit more used to it, you're going to be able to do it second nature. Another thing as well is you don't have to kind of rigidly keep, this finger on this string, this finger on this string, this finger on this string. Say I'm going up here, I move around a bit more. I kind of generally use these 3 fingers and the thumb for the plucking. But the general idea is when you're kind of moving up and down the strings, you want to be keeping every single string but the one you're using as quiet as possible, just by resting some fingers on them, preferably the fleshy bits of the fingers as well, just to keep them nice and muted. Another reason muting's really important with slide guitarists, despite the fact we are playing slide, you don't want to completely overkill the sliding. Like, I know that sounds kind of stupid, but if you listen to all the legends of slide guitar, they don't slide in and out of every single note. When you're playing, if you just transition every note like, it's going to kind of get boring quite quickly. That sound's going to wear thin quite fast. which is where muting kind of helps mix things up a bit. Like, you want to try and use that muting technique to get a soundless transition between notes sometimes, especially when you're playing in standard tuning like I am now. So just kind of try that running through a minor pentatonic or something. You just want to obviously that's kind of really exaggerated and slowed down, but that's just so you can kind of get the technique really clean, so you can kind of get the idea for demonstrative purposes. Like, you just want to be moving from one note to another with none of the... You just want it nice, clean and muted. Get the idea. This exercise is like the thing that helped me most with kind of single note muting and playing single note lines on guitar. Like I said, you just want to keep running through minor pentatonic, blues scale, like any scale you want really. It's still going to be good practice for the muting, so there's no kind of slidey going on between each note. Like most things, you're going to have to start off slow and build up your speed, and of all things as well, I think this is something where you really want to take up your time building the speed. Because if you really nail this technique and get it down, it makes your playing sound so slick and so tidy. Like, you obviously don't want to be stupid and mute the sliding out all the time, or it would be pointless playing with a slide. But like most things that are done well, it's the art of balance between the complete muting of the sliding and overusing it. Like I said, if you won't find many like well-known slide players who literally slide in and out of every single note. It's all about the balance. So yeah, that's kind of the general rundown of the technique. It feels really unnatural at first, it's going to feel really weird and uncomfortable, but once you've been doing it for a little bit, like most things, it's just going to be absolute second nature. And if you want a bit of further like reading on this, you look up someone called Alan Hines on YouTube. He's the guy that kind of turned me onto this technique, and he's literally like one of the best slide guitar players I've ever seen. His technique is absolutely ridiculous, and through, you know, the kind of clean transitions from one note to another, he can play some ridiculous kind of shred passages with a slide guitar, and the speed he can get out of a slide is just absolutely dumbfounding. So, you know, if you want a little bit of further viewing on the subject, I definitely recommend looking him up. And yeah, thank you for your time, and hope you guys learned something.